Selected parts from the book My Life Story, written by Shri K.J.S. Dhillon. Part 19. On 5th August 2019, the Government of India abrogated Articles 370 and 35A of the Indian Constitution by an Act of Parliament passed by a majority vote and duly assented by the Honorable President of India. The entire cast of the team security forces met in the evening, and thereafter we would meet every evening, at times even twice a day, to take stock of the developing situation. National Security Advisor also arrived in Srinagar on the evening of 5th August and stayed there for about a fortnight, personally chairing all the daily meetings of our team security forces. The agenda at these meetings was both to assess the situation on the ground in the past 12 to 24 hours, as also to plan and coordinate actions among all agencies for the future. We would also conduct a war gaming exercise and brainstorming to anticipate what could go wrong and how we would counter it. At these meetings, all the attendees also shared feedback from their individual sources about every aspect, including that which may or may not have fallen within the domain of their department's activity or jurisdiction. For instance, whenever I received some inputs through army channels, I would share micro level information such as a particular medical shop not opening or an ATM running dry of cash, and this was immediately taken care of by the divisional commissioner on the very same day. Our regular meetings were highly effective and enabled instant implementation of any critical suggestion or feedback made by anyone based on their experience or information. Here, I would like to recount an interesting anecdote pertaining to the day of the abrogation, that is 5th August 2019. Readers may be aware of the fact that the former captain of the Indian cricket team and India's famous sports star Mahendra Singh Dhoni is a territorial army officer of the rank of lieutenant colonel. He had come to Kashmir for a normal training schedule with his battalion, which was deployed in Chinar Course at that time. Taking a break from his training, he had met me in my office in the morning of 5th August 2019, and that same evening he was slated to visit my residence for dinner, wherein I had also invited a few more officers and ladies with an avid interest in cricket who were keen to meet Dhoni. We were all covertly busy with the preparations for dealing with the situation post the abrogation, but had to carry out all these routine activities overtly, as it was necessary to show normality and not let the inimical elements gauge our intentions. In the army, we call this surprise and deception, and I dare say We achieved it to the hilt of military precision. Meanwhile, the announcement of the abrogation of Articles 370 and 35A on 5th August 2019 by the Government of India had led to a mountain of work for me, and I was extremely busy figuring out our future plan of action, which could now get stymied if things were not controlled in time. Hence, despite being the host for the dinner party at my home that evening, I returned home as late as 11:30 p.m. because of my work-related preoccupations, whereas all the guests, including Dhoni himself, had reached much before me. In the meantime, in order to deny the use of high speed internet to the terrorists and the Pakistani propaganda machinery, and to ensure the safety of the installations and people, all the mobile services were temporarily suspended in Kashmir. In the midst of all this confusion, my son called me on one of the army lines, informing me that the sister of one of his friends, Divya, who was a PhD student in a hostel in Kashmir University, needed to be evacuated from her hostel. Based on all the details about Divya shared by my son, I instructed one of my teams to visit the university, locate her, ferry her up to the airport, and arrange a ticket on a flight that would take her home unharmed and safe. However, though my team managed to locate Divya and even accompanied her to the airport, unfortunately, she was not able to get a ticket for the flight. Thereafter, while I was busy in official meetings, my ADC, Captain Sandeep Singh, whom I had deputed to help evacuate Divya, gate crashed my meeting, informing me that the girl had not succeeded in getting on to the flight and was extremely apprehensive and worried about her fate. I told Captain Sandeep to ask her what she wanted to do now that she could not catch a flight. She had the option of either coming to the Srinagar army cantonment and spending the night there, or going back to her hostel till she could actually get an airline ticket for her journey back home. Incidentally, being a Kashmir University student, she was deeply influenced by exaggerated propaganda about the intransigent and unfriendly behavior of army personnel in Kashmir. She, therefore, was reluctant to come to the army cantonment, but at the same time absolutely unwilling to go back to the hostel. Finally, she hesitatingly agreed to come to the cantonment, and Captain Sandeep arranged a room for her for the night next to the house of a commanding officer who was staying there with his family, including his mother and wife. But she was intensely disturbed and on edge and broke down. This news was of her relentless sobbing was also conveyed to me while I was in an important meeting where we were discussing the modalities of dealing with a crisis like situation at hand, and here was an actual humanitarian crisis involving a young girl student caught in the imbroglio who was extremely scared to stay in the hostel and equally scared to come to the cantonment. As I put on my compassionate cap and tried to view the situation from this girl's perspective, an idea suddenly occurred to me which would possibly help to tide over the situation. I urged Sandeep to request her to join us for dinner at my residence, where She may have been able to overcome her fear in the company of the other ladies and, more importantly, get to meet Dhoni. So she was escorted to my place for dinner, and sure enough, this ingenious idea did the trick so well that by the time I reached home at around 11:30 p.m., Divya had not only been pacified but was quite upbeat, taking selfies with Dhoni and thoroughly enjoying herself at the party. This incident clearly shows that the army also has a human face, and army personnel can show tremendous gentleness and compassion when required, just as effectively as they can show their tough side in a warlike situation. I can also vouch for the fact that numerous other security forces personnel and civil administration staff would have been helping people in Kashmir in a similar manner that night to deal with the emerging situation, helping them safely return to their homes. Divya continues to be in contact till date, and I even received an invitation to attend her brother's marriage. As an aside, I must mention here that the authorities had to shut down the internet to preclude any mischief or sharing of misleading or contrived information on the social media. For instance, there was a possibility that some mischievous elements could pass around a video depicting violence in, say, Palestine or Syria or some other country as that occurring in Kashmir and provoke and agitate youngsters by spreading misinformation. The high speed internet was thus curtailed to prevent downloading and sharing of propaganda videos and spreading of fake news. However, landlines were restored after a few days. Even 2G internet was restored, thereby facilitating all important and routine activities like uploading of application forms and depositing fee for admission by students, internet banking and booking of airline tickets and hotel reservations, among others. Kiosks were also set up in the district and tehsil offices, police stations, and the airport, among other important access points, to enable people to conveniently carry out their online transactions. The negative and false propaganda that everything had been shut down and that normal life in Kashmir had been completely crippled was being spread by Pakistan. I can say with absolute conviction and honesty that all necessary facilities like hospitals, dispensaries, medical stores, grocery stores, ATMs, and government offices were fully functional. The canard about an indefinite lockdown was also absolutely incorrect, as no lockdown had been imposed anywhere in Kashmir. Out of all the police station jurisdictions through the length and breadth of the state, only section 144 restricting the assembly and movement of more than 4 people at one location was imposed in the initial days only in limited areas which housed certain sensitive installations. Even in these areas, people were free to move around in smaller numbers and perform their day to day outdoor chores. All food provisions, groceries, and daily necessities were freely available, and people had the liberty to shop for them as and when required. The word lockdown, as legally tenable, was a misnomer and was not a reality in post abrogation in Kashmir. In fact, Pakistani proxies and terrorists tried to impose a lockdown by killing the local Kashmiri shop owners who opened their shops to earn their livelihood, and also by killing truck drivers and laborers and burning down apple orchards and trucks that were transporting the apple produce from Kashmir. The guiding principle of Operation Ma initiative was to involve mothers in the campaign to prevent young men from succumbing to the temptation of joining the terrorists' ranks, especially those who were unemployed or discontented and therefore easy targets for being lured into the terrorists' fold. Taking a cue from the Holy Quran, which says, "Do good and serve your mother, then your mother, and then your father," I made a direct appeal to mothers to prevent their children from being misguided by inimical forces. This was reported in the media as well. On 19th November 2019, the Economic Times brought out a story, Operation Ma by Army in Jammu and Kashmir yields results. Around 50 local militants returned to families. My message to the mothers was simple. Today's stone pelter is tomorrow's terrorist, so save your children from being killed. This struck a chord with the mothers in particular and the common public in general. Our analysis of the situation over the last 1.5 years highlighted the short shelf life of a local terrorist. 7% of the local youngsters who picked up a weapon were getting killed in the first 10 days of their joining the terrorists' tanjeems, and 9% inclusive of this same percent were getting killed in the first 30 days, 17% in the first 3 months, 36% in the first 6 months, and about 64% were getting killed in the first 1 year. This implied that if three boys had joined the terrorist organizations, two of them or two-thirds of them were likely to get eliminated in the first 1 year alone. Further, 83% of the boys who had joined terrorist organizations had a history of having indulged in stone pelting. This message was conveyed with facts and figures to the mothers and also widely disseminated publicly. It gradually started appealing to mothers who realized that if they were sending their sons for stone pelting to earn a paltry rupees 500, the boys were literally being molded into becoming future terrorists who could get killed either within the first 7 days or at least within a year. Thus, in a way, we were subtly affixing the responsibility of curtailing the recruitment of young boys as terrorists on themselves by clearly informing them of the perils of allowing their children to indulge in incidents of stone pelting, which would eventually lead them up the garden path to certain death. I realized from my experience that Kashmir boys listen to their mothers much more than to their fathers. Hence, the genesis of Operation Ma lay in my understanding of this societal and family dynamics in Kashmir. During my previous tenures as a captain, major, or commanding officer and brigadier commander in Kashmir, on the elimination of a local terrorist, we invariably found a letter in his pocket which had been written either by him to his mother or by his mother to him. It was thus very clear to me that the boys in Kashmir have an extremely strong bond with their mothers, which was what we were trying to exploit to achieve our goal of preventing the entry of young, impressionable boys in their formative years into the league of terrorism. Operation Ma, which was initiated in this backdrop, resulted in the return of at least 50 boys who had joined terrorist organizations. I consciously used the word return instead of surrender because I realized that these boys had been led astray. The families of these boys were given absolute assurance that their identities would be kept confidential as also that no legal case would be filed against them and they would be relocated to some other place in India for work if they so wanted. As I mentioned earlier, more than 50 boys returned to the fold of their families. Interestingly, at times, many of the encounters were stopped halfway through, and the parents and friends of these boys living in their villages were called to come and convince them to absolve violence. In such cases, the anti terrorist operation would be suspended for about 2 to 3 hours, and when the family members or friends of these recently recruited terrorists came to the site where the operation was in progress, they would be given loudspeakers and encouraged to interact with the boys face to face or through a telephone call. There have also been instances when the mobile recharge of the terrorists had run out and we stepped in to get their mobile phones recharged so that they could speak to their mothers or any other family members or neighbor or friend. At times, the boys have also returned during an actual encounter. That was the sum of total of the peace that we ensured during the immediate period before and after the abrogation of 5 August 2019. It therefore did not happen all of a sudden, and a lot of effort and preparation had gone into it to ensure its effective implementation. As the name suggests, Kharyat Patrol means a well being or welfare patrol. The Kharyat Patrol comprised a group of security personnel who visited the far flung areas for their routine area domination or reconnaissance in order to help resolve any problem faced by people not having access to normal services due to inclement weather and hostile terrain. A typical career patrol is led by an officer or JCO, and in addition to combat soldiers, invariably has a doctor or a nursing assistant and is equipped with medicines. These patrols also use it to carry white-listed mobile phones for people to make free calls within and outside India when mobile services were temporarily suspended immediately after the abrogation. In addition, at times, the carrier patrols also carried generators in their vehicles to enable people to charge their mobile phones and other devices in areas with poor access to electricity, power, and communication facilities. As part of Carrier Patrol initiative, we also organized regular liaison of conferences at the level of the company commanders, which helped in amicably resolving some long-standing small irritants. I coined the phrase "Hamsaya hai hum," we are neighbors, to reiterate that we were co-inhabitants in a common land and had to live peacefully and congenially with each other. This initiative is really close to my heart as I have never lived in my village as much as I have lived in Kashmir. The people of Kashmir are thus my true co passengers in the journey of life, and I realized that everything needed to be done to make this journey meaningful and positive, especially for people who had suffered prolonged violence and misery, often for no fault of theirs. Even army posts on the line of control and in the hinterlands thus acted as a nodes of the Hamsaya concept. Hamsaya symbolizing the values of humanitarianism and peaceful coexistence would thus come to people's help anywhere and everywhere, especially those living in the harshest climatic and topographical regions and in a state of deprivation. We encouraged people to approach the army posts for assistance at any time of the day or night, where we would provide every type of help, including the use of a military aircraft to evacuate or transport people in an emergency, such as for carrying patients to hospitals or a medical facility. In emergency, the use of an army helicopter to pick up civilian patients from remote areas in Kashmir and bring them for medical attention to the nearest hospital was part of the concept of Hamsaya Hai Hum. Additional doctors and medical supplies were organized to aid the public in far-flung areas, symbolizing the true spirit of army as a peacetime ally and wartime protector. I remember an incident that happened on 14 January 2020, a day before Army Day, that is 15 January, wherein one routine Kharyat patrol in the remotest parts of Baramulla was informed about a pregnant lady, Mrs. Shamima, who had started having labor pains and required urgent hospitalization. As all the roads were blocked due to heavy snow, the patrol leader immediately contacted the base and requested a helicopter evacuation for the lady. However, though the helicopter took off for the destination, it could not land there because of inclement weather and poor visibility, and they had to call for an ambulance instead. But this effort too seemed in vain. The post commander therefore immediately summoned about 100 odd soldiers along with 30 villagers who beat the snow along the route manually to enable the ambulance to move on the snow laden road up to the halfway point, with the Jawans physically pushing the ambulance. In the meantime, the expectant mother was literally carried on a charpoy perched on the shoulders of Jawans for 4 hours to the halfway point, from where she was shifted into the ambulance and taken to a hospital in Baramulla, where she delivered a healthy child. This incident attracted a lot of media attention, and the Honorable Prime Minister tweeted the quote the next day, which was Army Day, that is 15th January 2020. As part of Project Sadbhavana, meaning goodwill, the army runs 28 army goodwill schools all over the Kashmir Valley with up to 10,000 students at any point of time. In these schools, the faculty of more than 500 and support staff of approximately 200 are all local Kashmiris, and so are the students. These schools have never shut down, even during the Hartal calls given by the separatists in the years gone by, and the students were provided uninterrupted quality education. As a result, the students of Army Goodwill schools are always working towards a brighter future and never got attracted towards terrorism. As per the available information, no student of Army Goodwill schools has joined the rank and file of terrorists in the recent past. At some stage, the army realized that only imparting good education at the school level was probably not adequate, and the students had to be guided and motivated for the next step of getting admission into eminent professional colleges. This initiative, entailing the selection of students to prepare them for competitive examinations, was implemented throughout J&K by the army, who would create groups of 30 or 50 children who had just completed high school for partaking of higher education. These children were provided with free boarding and lodging, free coaching and stationery, and every kind of assistance towards preparing them and even applying for competitive examinations for entry into medical and engineering colleges. These initiatives also continued uninterrupted during the post abrogation period. We offered the students who were part of the Super 30 or Super 50 groups the option of returning home after the abrogation in case they apprehended some unrest, but not a single student from these groups left for home, and all of them continued their routine studies and coaching throughout this period. Even the local instructors or coaches continued to visit the coaching centers regularly, and the results of that year's batch were highly encouraging. Almost 90% of the students got placements in very eminent professional colleges. Another indicator of peace that prevailed was when a delegation of 27 members of European Parliament arrived in Kashmir on a 2-day visit from 29 October 2019, 2 days before the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir came into existence on 31st October 2019, to assess the ground reality firsthand post the abrogation of Articles 370 and 35A in the backdrop of the very vicious Pakistani narrative and propaganda of lockdown. Then, on 9 to 10 January 2020, another 15 members delegation of foreign diplomats, mainly ambassadors and high commissioners, visited Kashmir. Subsequently, on 12 and 13 February 2020, the third 25-member delegation of foreign diplomats, including envoys from Germany, Canada, France, New Zealand, Mexico, Italy, Afghanistan, Austria, Uzbekistan, Poland, and some envoys of European Union, visited Kashmir. All the delegates drove through the city of Srinagar, met the media persons, politicians, and civil society representatives from various fields, and were briefed about the prevailing situation by the army and civil officials. This was widely covered in the media. Walter Linder, Germany's ambassador to India, who visited part of the third delegation, while speaking to the Hindustan Times after his visit, said, "On the way from the airport to the hotel, we got our first little glimpse of what is out there. The shops were open, things seemed normal. We didn't see a lockdown." Thanks for listening. Incidentally, being a Kashmir University student, she was deeply influenced by exaggerated propaganda about the intransigent and unfriendly behavior of army personnel. Intransigent means unwilling or refusing to change one's views or agree about something. Obstinate. The canard about the indefinite lockdown was also absolutely incorrect, as no lockdown had been imposed anywhere in Kashmir. Canard, C-A-N-A-R-D, canard means a rumor. The word lockdown as legally tenable was a misnomer and was not a reality in post-abrogation in Kashmir. MISNOMER, misnomer means a name that is wrong or not appropriate. Thanks very much.